Hey everyone, it's James Lindsay, and you are listening to the new Discourses podcast, and I have just come back from Israel again, my second trip in 3 months. It's a nice escape from, it turns out, I stormed on the North American continent to go to Israel in January. Dodged almost all of that mess, and since my last day was down at Masada and at the Dead Sea in the Judean desert, where it was almost 90 degrees Fahrenheit, it was pretty good escape. And so I'm just going to tell you to start kind of a real quick story for what I want to tell you about this trip to Israel. I'm just going to share a little bit. There's no organization of this podcast. I don't know how long it's going to be. I don't know what I'm going to say. I didn't think it through very well. But let's just go. So I went down south again, which is kind of what they say over there sometimes when they mean they went to the Gaza envelope. So I went down on my first trip. If you listen to my podcast about that Am Yisrael Chai, you'll have heard that I went to a kibbutz called Kibbutz Be'eri, and then I went to the Nova Festival site. I also went to this site where the observers who observed the Gaza border were murdered, and they've set up a memorial for the watchers or the observers. So that was last trip. This trip, I went down this time with some different characters. In fact, I went down with Seth Dillon and Charlie Kirk's pastor, Rob McCoy, and Pamela Perezki, an old friend of mine, and some others. And we went down to the Gaza envelope, and we went to two different kibbutzim. Kibbutz is like a community or a commune, sort of. They're kind of leftist. And kibbutzim, I-M, is the masculine way you make a word plural in Hebrew, so it's plural. We went to two different ones. Kibbutz Nir Oz, which I'm not saying right, Nir Oz or something like this. And then Kibbutz Kfar Aza. And at Kibbutz Nir Oz, all these kibbutzim have security. As you might imagine, they had security before, but the security is organized a little bit differently now. It's a little bit more hands-on. The weaponry, for example, is not kept in an armory off over there somewhere that you have to go to. The security personnel stay armed. And so we were given a kind of tour by the security guy there at Kibbutz Nir Oz. Eventually we went to, just to finish the story of what we did, we eventually also went to the Nova site, and I'll talk about that in a minute, the Nova Festival site, where everybody knows what happened there. So we toured the Kibbutz Nir Oz, which is a different story than Kibbutz Be'eri, but it's the same story, but it's a different story. The details are different. Like, you walk through these just bullet-ridden kindergartens and bullet holes on the outside and burned out on the inside. Kind of to send a message, to the people who live there that, you can't protect your children from us. We get to the very end after we tour through this, and we look out and we get to this spot where you can see Gaza, which is just right there. It's not that far. And you can see Gaza, and there's not a lot of buildings standing in Gaza. If you remember my podcast from last time, or if you've seen some of the pictures that some of us have shared or otherwise, not a lot of buildings standing in Gaza now. But the buildings that are standing are things like schools and mosques and hospitals, which you have to get all these special clearances and permissions, not just with lawyers and the military, but with international law and like these advisors on what it will look like in the world stage to do a military operation against a military target that happens to have been embedded by Hamas inside of something like a school. So it struck some of us, it was very poignant for at least someone in our group to notice that the only buildings that are standing roughly are schools, but the schools in the kibbutz were riddled with machine gun fire and hit with grenades and set on fire inside. So schools are on limits for the Hamas to attack and send terror, the terrorists to send terror into the Israeli heart, but they are off limits for the Israelis to target, even when they are being used dual purpose as military installations without extraordinary clearances being approved, which often leaves the Israeli military in a bad spot. Okay, so That's a striking difference. It's very indicative of kind of what you see everywhere there. But this hasn't been the point of my story. It's just color on the canvas. The point of my story actually is that as we were coming down from this kind of, elevated platform, they were talking about how they had just had a concert and they started to make wine again. A lot of the kibbutzim are very agricultural. They do a lot of the fruit growing and produce growing for a lot of the whole nation. But they just started to make wine again. They had just had a concert right down here underneath the platform we were standing on. And like life is coming back and they're rebuilding. Apparently we didn't go to Kibbutz Be'eri, but 3 months ago I went there. It was a scene of devastation. I'd be happy to show anybody pictures. I still have most of them on my phone. And then now it's mostly rebuilt. Apparently had I gone again, it would have been a very different site. The second kibbutz we went to, Kfar Aza, is mostly rebuilt, although they've left a section of like small apartments. That's one of the hardest things I've ever seen in my life, actually, in the state that Hamas left them. And it's not pretty. It's tough. Some of you will have seen the picture I posted on X of me and Seth Dillon standing there with our hands in our pockets, kind of next to each other by a tree, just kind of staring at this horror that I think Pamela, the same Pamela I mentioned a minute ago, Peresky, snapped for us. I digress. The point is that we're coming down off of this platform where the conference, the concert and all this, and life is coming back. And somebody asked the security guy, and this is back at Kibbutz Nir Oz, not at Kfar Aza. So at Nir Oz, and asked the security guy basically, like, why did you come back? He had told us his story. I'm not going to tell the story because I can't tell it right, and that would be just not right to try to tell it. But in essence, obviously it's a bad place after October 7th, 23. In fact, you don't have to say 23, you just say October 7th. Everybody knows which one you mean now, kind of like maybe for a long time, maybe forever. But why'd you come back? It's a hard question, right? That was home. That was like a community. Like these things, like really, they're like communes. Like the people there live that way. And so, but then they're this site of just unfathomable devastation and pain and horror and murder and worse than murder. So why did you come back? And what struck me, and this is really the theme of the podcast that I wanted to record about this trip, was his answer. His answer started, he gave a longer answer, but he wasn't talking to me, so I didn't hear all of it. But I heard the first part, which was followed by a long pause, which means it was a sufficient answer that he gave. And his answer was Jewish values. That's it, Jewish values. Why did you come back? Jewish values. And that's actually what I want to talk about, what I got out of this trip. This is a very different trip than my first trip, which was kind of a very organized tour put together by the Herut Center for Israeli Liberty. This is a much not like that trip. I mean, I did things with the Herut Center for a couple of days. They treated me very well. They took care of me. And of course, most of my friends that I already knew from before are connected to them. So that was all very good. We did a public event. I taught at their Argamon Center in their offices for a day about woke. It was interesting and good day. We had a good adventure there. But I also went over for Minister Amichai Shikli's Combating Anti-Semitism conference that he's now held 2 years in a row on Holocaust Remembrance Day. So there was another purpose. So this was a kind of fragmented trip in a sense. Rather than being a cohesive tour, there were like these kind of 4 pieces that just kind of don't go together. There was like the kind of initial couple of days, which were sort of play it by ear, figure it out. The second of those is when we went down south, and then there was the conference, which had its own thing. And then the conference was over. That was it. See you, bye, adios. And so the next thing was my time with Herut. And then I had kind of 2 days at the end, Shabbat in particular, to figure out and fill for myself. And so it was a very interesting and different trip. And I was calling it my real Jerusalem experience trip because rather than touring all over the place, I mostly stayed in Jerusalem. And I tried to and luckily I have friends there that helped me do this, kind of tried to get the experience of being in Jerusalem. What's it like to live there? And the answer actually comes back to the same thing. It's Jewish values. It's very interesting. So I've been reflecting a lot on how Jewish values, which, I'm not going to speak about those a ton. I'm not an expert in Jewish values. I'm not going to speak out of turn about that. But I do have a sense of some of this, but I'm very interested in reflecting on what it implies, what Americans can learn. A lot of you might not know that Jerusalem kind of sees itself as sort of very literally a shining city on a hill, a place where, the light of civilization flows forth to the world. Jews very frequently see themselves, when you hear God's chosen people, it's not like God came down and said, "Hey, guess what? You're the guys, right? You're the best." It's actually something a lot different. And if you read the history, the fact is that the Jews were not the first people God tried to choose. He tried to choose other people. But what it is that they were the ones that accepted this responsibility. God chose a people who were willing to accept the responsibility to be a light unto the nations, which, by the way, the nations in Hebrew is goyim. So a lot of that word's like a big, controversy right now. And a lot of people, of course, see it as meaning non-Jews, but it means the nations. So it means also people from the other nations that are not Jewish. It's not some word of supremacy. All the Jews are laughing at the people who are freaking out about the word goyim because of its appearance, with Jeffrey Epstein using it kind of in a nasty, or probably half joking, but maybe nasty, superior way in the Epstein file documentation. Perfect fodder for lots of propaganda and the typical BS we're all tired of now. But none of this is my point. Jerusalem sees itself as kind of a light to civilization. The Jews see themselves as a people who take on certain responsibilities because they were the third or fourth group asked, and they said, okay, we will, to go into this covenant with God, to be the holders of memory, the light of civilization and law, and to live as they live. Notice they don't really evangelize. To live as they live in order to give both that light to the world and that light back into the past, to the very beginnings of the covenant with God, to the very beginnings of civilization. And so when you're in Jerusalem, you kind of get this feeling of that, right? You get this feeling. People ask me, did you connect to God? No, but you connect to that. You connect to this idea of being a light unto civilization. Get this idea of Jerusalem not in a self-aggrandizing way, not the way that the Chinese do with their Zhongguo, which literally means China, but it means center kingdom. Not in the way that you get this feeling, though, that it's sort of the center of civilization. They have this old map that's like a trifoil, like three lobes coming off of a centerpiece, with Jerusalem in the middle, and below is Africa, and off to the right, to the east is Asia, and to the north and east is Asia, and to the north and west is Europe and North America. And Jerusalem there is at kind of the center, and it's sort of this symbol, this trifoil symbol pointing downward. With Jerusalem at the center. And you get that feeling, you get this deep connection to history, past and present, and they say future, that you can see the past and the present at the same time, which is true, because everywhere there are these historical sites. It's kind of amazing, and you can connect to this deep history, but everywhere also you are in a modern economy. You're in a modern world with modern people living modern lives, solving modern problems, while retaining ancient customs, speaking an ancient language. Hebrew was a dead language, and it's not a dead language anymore. Hebrew has been revived. Some huge percentage of the world's Jews speak Hebrew. In Israel, most people, I think it might actually only be half, but a whole lot of people speak Hebrew, to where if you don't know any Hebrew, it can be a bit of a challenge. So it's kind of an amazing connection of past and present. And of course, then there's the question of future. And you get this connection to not just history, but like to the very roots of civilization, the very roots of what it means to be a civilized place. It has something to do with Jerusalem. Now, we famously heard that America is like this handshake between Jerusalem and Athens. I've elaborated on that, said there was a handshake between Jerusalem and Athens to box out Alexandria, all of this esotericism, this wizardry. So it's like faith and reason coming together to box out mysticism and manipulation. Maybe Alexandria shouldn't be held up as such a target for that kind of accusation, but I think you get my meaning, because that's where the Hermeticism kind of comes from. That's where a lot of these Gnostic cults came from in the first century. And so you get this sense of this being an important pillar of civilization and very relevant to the United States, even Jerusalem itself. I don't have the story correctly because I don't have it in front of me until I read these things after. Like, words go in my brain when people talk and they kind of don't stick right until I have a chance to sit back and read this stuff later. So I'm going to embellish this story probably a little bit, or maybe get some of the details wrong. But you have King David as sort of this central figure. And one of the things I did on the first full day I was there was went to the Tower of David. And so we went and toured this museum on the Tower of David, and we heard a lot of the stories, and we seen a lot of the things. This is one of the points that was raised there, that why is Jerusalem so relevant to the American experiment? Why is it so central? Well, because Jerusalem is basically Washington, D.C., but in a sense for the world, or for the civilized world. And why do I say that? Well, so you have King David, and he slays Goliath and so on and so forth. The next thing you know, he's going to be king, and he's, if I'm not mistaken, this is a part I'm not sure about, but I believe he's Judean, so he's in Judea. There might be a Benjamin in this somewhere that I'm missing, but I think he's in Judea, and he's trying to figure out where he's going to set up his capital, and he wants his capital to be somewhere that will represent all of the tribes of Judaism, all of Israel, not just Judea. And so he sets up his capital at the very north end of Judea, on the border with Samaria and other parts, which is Jerusalem, which also, of course, has this deep history all the way back to Abraham's would-be sacrifice of Isaac on Mount Moriah, or as they would say, Avram and Isaac. At any rate, this is fascinating stuff. So he sets up the capital there. He sets up the city of David in the tower, which has now been found and excavated and is a tour site. And the Tower of David is set up, above that, right there on the corner of Old Jerusalem, which was the city at the time. And he sets up his capital there because he wants it not to be a part of any one region and any one tribe, but a capital for all of the country. And this is exactly what the American founders did when they created the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C., not as a part of Virginia, not as a part of Maryland, not as a part of any other state, but as a federal district completely separated, largely in the center, by the way, at the time of the colonies, but coastal so that it had the opportunity to move goods and so on. But the District of Columbia idea, Washington, D.C., as the capital, not in any state, but as a separate territory that is not any of the states, was set up specifically modeled after this idea of the founding of Jerusalem as the center and capital of Israel by King David. So when you start to look at, America, when we start to think about what it is to be American, you start to realize that somewhere deep down in there, like really deep down in the bones of the philosophy that founded America, you have Jewish values. Like it or not, you can scream that America is a Christian country all you want, and in some ways it is. It's very Protestant in a lot of ways, but at the end of the day, it was founded around an awful lot of Jewish values. This is why the Liberty Bell quotes, is it Deuteronomy is quoted in the Liberty Bell? This is why the Deuteronomy and the Hebrew Bible are overwhelmingly the most cited texts by the founders in the foundation of the country. This idea of building off of Mosaic law was very central to the foundation of America, but not just that. This Jewish value structure of freedom, of liberty, of this ability to pursue and argue and debate. And this was just everywhere in my experience over there. It's very hard to talk about, in kind of coherent terms, maybe this quickly after going. But this idea that the same values that would lead Jews from just the things that I went to set up and preserve and celebrate the tabernacle at Shiloh, or to defend to the last Masada in 73-ish AD against this Roman siege and attempt to just stamp this little group of people out. Now, they're weird rebels. It's a very complicated story. Nobody quite knows what the motivations were there, but to why would you go back and rebuild your kibbutz after October 7th is because it's what you do. You pick up, you go on with life. Why would you have this, vibrant life after the Holocaust. It's because it's what you do. Coming back up with, it was really meaningful, to go with Seth Dillon and Rob McCoy down to the South. But coming back up, you're mulling things over to the degree that we were all chatting to the degree that we could. We were mulling things over, in the van, coming back up to the city, kind of rushing. We have this important gala to kick off Minister Cheekley's conference, and so we're rushing back up and we're thinking about what just happened, and it's just, kind of so striking that it would be the easiest thing in the world for Jewish people, for Israelis, to wallow in victimhood, to define themselves as, the people of the Holocaust or the destruction of 70 AD or the diaspora or the various pressures up kind of culminating in the 11th century, living under both kind of Muslim and Christian domination, depending on where they were in the world. It would be very easy to wallow in this victimhood. And, it's true that, this does express itself somewhat in American Judaism, unfortunately. It's a stark difference when you go see Israeli Judaism. It just is. Or Israeli culture. It doesn't even have to be Judaism. When you just see Israelis, these are not victims. These are people who see that bad things happen in life, and they say the thing that we have to do is succeed, that we have to continue. The revenge that they sought to get on the Nazis was not to obliterate Germany. It's not to rig up the banks that they don't actually really control so that Germany can't have standing in the world. The response to World War II was that Hitler wanted to take out all of the Jews, so we're going to make as many babies as we can to kind of negate his attempt to wipe out Jews. Like, how much life can you celebrate? So, I didn't visit Yad Vashem this time, which is the Holocaust Memorial in Jerusalem, but I did last time. There was a delegation to go to that, but I went to the Shuk instead of my real Jerusalem experience. So they went and saw that, and I went and saw vibrant Jewish life at the Shuk, the shop, the market. It's like a couple of streets, like an open air market. It's super cool. I went in a suit. I strongly recommend going to the Shuk in a suit. People don't do that, so you stick out. People talk to you. They think you're famous. A young man came up and asked me if I was J.D. Vance. I said that I wasn't. I don't have any eyeliner. He didn't get the joke. But we had a good time nonetheless. Ran into a bunch of people who recognized me, who had heard the previous podcast I recorded. Really touching, but you see vibrant life. But, you go to somewhere like Yad Vashem, and I said last time in the other podcast, you come out the back and you just see city life. You just see this hill, and you see the cars winding on the highway, white lights coming one way, red lights going the other, the headlights and taillights. I got the beautiful fortune to come out at sunset, just after sunset, just it's properly getting dark. You see the lights in the houses, and you see life, Israeli life going on, everyday life, familiar life any modern person would fully recognize as the vibrancy of a modern. In that case, that view is something like suburban, but urban-ish, off the side of a city experience. And all I could think, I got asked, I told the story before, was what do you see? And all I could think was Am Israel Chai is what I see. The Jewish people live. The Israelis live. They live. They're living. They're just living. And this is what I'm talking about with the Jewish values. And these Jewish values, I think, also are American values. This is what we do. Life's hard. We pick up and we do things. Problems come. We solve the problems. We have, natural disasters. We have wars. What it is, we don't get down. We rebuild. We build better. And we pick up and we go on. These values are core to kind of both of our people. We don't wallow in the miseries of the past, or I don't think so. I didn't think that victimhood was an American value. It's certainly not this Israeli Jewish value, and it's inspiring. Like I said, we were coming back up, and all I just kept thinking was it would be so easy for people here to wallow in victimhood, and you don't see victimhood. You see, buckling down and doing life. I mean, just doing life. And it's a shocking testament. But I got the explanation for why. Jewish values, right? And so what all did I do? So one of the Jewish values is food. I'm telling you, the food thing is real. So as soon as I land, some friends picked me up from the airport. Before you know it, it's actually what's called Motzei Shabbat. So I landed on Shabbat. Shabbat had not ended. I finally get to the hotel. Shabbat ends just as I'm getting there. So they have this period of time after Shabbat. Shabbat is sundown Friday till about an hour after sundown Saturday, when the stars come out. And so then they have this time, Motzei Shabbat, which is like the exit of Shabbat. So you have this, and in the language of text editing, you have this orphan period of time, which is Saturday night. So Shabbat is ended. You get to reintegrate back into everyday life. The holy time has, the set aside holy time has ended, and now you're going to reintegrate into life. And I just, first thing, do you want to go have like one of the best burgers of your life? So I jump in the car with a new friend, and we take off, and drive 35-40 minutes to a burger spot he knows, and we have this giant hamburger and french fries and beers, and it's fantastic. And it's just this like, this is what you do. You take people, you show them what you love, what's great, and the food there is really great. So it's fun. Next day we get up, and I just got up really early because the jet lag is really weird. It's difficult to sleep when you come from America over there. The first few nights you wake up really early in the morning, and I walked across Jerusalem by myself, over to some other hotels to have meetings with all the dignitaries from the conference at a special breakfast. 7 a.m. just walking through everyday life in Jerusalem. Now, keep in mind, bearing down on us the whole time. My flight, I wasn't sure if it was actually going to go because no one knows when Trump's going to strike Iran. So you have this idea that Trump might strike Iran. If Iran gets hit, they're going to blame Israel, or they're going to target Israel at any rate. Israel might be involved in whatever happens militarily there. They obviously want the Islamic Republic to fall. And so, war is totally a possibility. So it was really this striking thing. It was, am I going to get there? Now I'm here. Is war going to happen today? Is war going to happen today? Is war going to happen today? Is my flight out of here going to get canceled? This was looming the whole time. And yet every single moment, again, Jewish values, was we just lived life. We just made plans like, what are we doing tomorrow? Oh, we're going to go get hummus and, plot the downfall of the woke right. We're going to have Jerusalem hummus, sit in our, well, it wasn't on a tower really. We're in the street, but at Hummus Bin Sarah, which is really good. And so, what we did plot the downfall of the woke right, eating hummus in Jerusalem, as one does. And so, you got this like making jokes thing going on too, right? You're always just kind of making fun of, there's all this bad stuff going on. It could be really frightening for Jews. And instead we're making jokes about it, having hummus. We take it seriously, but make a joke. We're aware of war, but we're just making everyday plans. Oh, yeah. Trump might strike on Shabbat. You never know. You want to go to the Dead Sea? Yeah, I do want to go to the Dead Sea. Let's just go to the Dead Sea. And, at one point the sabers were rattling pretty hard, and we're just, having a cordial dinner and meeting. Didn't even check our phones. Figured, we'll find out if the war comes, because if Iran starts shooting rockets, the sirens will go off, and we'll find out that way. And we're not stressed out about it. It's just this kind of be so calm that it makes other people nervous sort of energy. But at the same time, people are preparing. They're just going and getting food and water just in case. They're making sure that their shelters and their houses are prepared to be able to have like a bit of an extended stay if it comes up. But meanwhile, you do that, and then you just have regular life. Really a kind of a stunning testament to this idea. And so, we're going about daily life, everyday life. Everything's super normal, but with this like looming threat of war, everything's just, it's very striking. If you were an American and you were in, say, New York City, and like some country literally had rockets trained on you, nobody would be okay, probably except the Jews. Everybody would be freaking out. And yet, nope, just everyday life. It's like freaking Tuesday, now it's Wednesday, now it's Thursday, and we're just going about it. It's striking. It's a striking phenomenon. Dangers there, life goes on. Calamity happens, we mourn, but we rebuild, and life goes on. And there's a lot of that. Life goes on. And this belief that, this connects, it stretches back for them over 5,000, almost 6,000 years. But certainly, over 3,500 years, it's just something else to experience. It's hard to explain. This is why people say if you go, you really should go if you can. But all right, just kind of like summarizing the trip. So Sunday I walk over, have this nice thing, get told all these kind of cool stories on the way back. Kind of tooled around, ended up going to lunch, got the tour of the Tower of David, like I said, with my friend Ronen Cheval, who is a brilliant philosopher there, and very, very smart man. And of course, we eat lunch, and then what do you do in your Real Jerusalem experience? You don't just eat lunch. Oh, this is a nice place, and the Mamila Mall, we're going to have this nice mall. And then he's telling me about this falafel dive, and so we have to go get the falafel, and then, we wander the city, and oh, good news, Ronan says to me, that falafel place I told you, it's here, and it's open. And this place, I guess the guy is really great, he's really nice, he's really sweet. As soon as we walked in, free falafel and a little boat handed to us. But then, we all get the falafels, but he's like, when he's done making falafel for the day, he goes home. When he's made enough and he's made enough money for the day, he just goes home. So you don't know if it's going to be open or not. Very different style of falafel, very good falafel. So here we are doing street falafel, wandering around the streets, see a Haredi neighborhood where people are very different. The big sign that says, your tour groups offend us, it's dress modestly, blah, blah, blah. See this lady with her young children walking through streets. She's got her hair wrapped, very traditional dress. As a dumb American, a gringoy, as I'm calling myself when I'm over there, you would see this and maybe wonder if she's a Muslim, but she's actually Jewish. And you see this almost like it's like she's wearing hijab, but it's not hijab, it's Jewish. And then this like strong Michigan accent comes out of her mouth as she talks to her kids. And I'm like, this place is amazing. So this woman probably just made Aliyah, which is coming home, went back to Israel to pick up her life and joined a Haredi community, which is, frankly, a little bit hardcore as far as these things go. And it's speaking in English, super strong Michigan accent to her children. It's just a trip. It's just culturally a trip. But everywhere you just kind of like get to experience this. We go down, people will be thrilled. I went to the Marzipan Bakery off Jaffa Street. So I got to experience this world famous rugelach, which I then had to figure out how to get close to my flight home so I could bring some home to my wife because, oh my God, that stuff's something else. I took a bite of it and I said, now I've been to Jerusalem. Now I've been to Israel. This is amazing. Chills down my back. You've got to go and try this dessert, this little chocolate croissant roll with sugar water poured all over it. I'm just telling you. And people wanting to share their country and wanting to share the experience of, something good with people. It's just kind of pervasive everywhere. So this is like Real Jerusalem experience day one, nice dinner that night, get up the next day. And rather than going to the Knesset and all this kind of formal stuff with the conference delegation, we jumped in the van, went south. I already talked about the trip to the Gaza envelope. Obviously, we went to a couple kibbutzim. Like I said, I was with Seth Dillon, with Rob McCoy. It was very moving. Pamela Perezki went on to the Nova Festival site, which I've been to before. And I'll tell you, it's harder the second time. Like, there's something about it, right? The first time you go, you get hit with shock. And the shock actually distracts you from how horrible it is. You're so shocked, you don't process it. And then the second time, like, you remember and you've been through the shock. And it's not shocking. It's just horrible. And it's so much harder the second time. And so I went, if you remember, I went last time and at this kind of semicircular set of benches, and we all sat and listened to Brigadier General Oren Solomon tell his story about how he fought there. And so for about half of the time, maybe a little more than half the time, I just went and sat on those benches again and just remembered. And it's like, I think that remembering is a really important thing. It's like, yeah, got a little choked up sitting there, like maybe a lot, I don't know. Tough American man noises, got a little choked up. And so, I just sat there and just kind of remembered. I remembered the story, or it looked connected to what I was seeing. I thought about Seth going through it for the first time. I don't think Rob McCoy, he's been to Israel 30-something times, but I don't think he's been down there. Maybe he has, I don't know. But it's just unbelievable. It's just shocking. So I sat there for a while, and my pieces of memory box, if you know what I'm talking about, and now has a little piece of the gravel from the Nova parking lot in it as well. Nothing, spectacular or special, just a rock, just gravel for a parking lot. But I know what it is and I know what it means, and it's good to remember. So, then we came back up, And we go to this conference. They call it a gala. It was just the opening of the conference. Bibi Netanyahu spoke. It was exciting. He was about 2 feet away from me at one point. Really, really close by. That was cool. And then, it turns out they gave Charlie Kirk this award for fighting for Jews and for Israel and standing up. And of course, he isn't with us, so he couldn't accept the reward. So that's part of why Rob McCoy was there, and he accepted the award and spoke. But we just went down south, man, and we play these videos of Charlie. Like, what are you doing? I can't watch videos of Charlie right now. It's my friend, man. I haven't watched any in a while. But again, the memories, right? Memory. It's a huge part. The light comes from the memory, right? And so that was hard. And what else happened? I don't know. I don't even remember the rest of that night. People talked. There was dancing and stuff on the stages. It was artistic. We'll call it that. Next morning was a conference. Conference was all day. It's a conference. It was great. Met a lot of people. For those who care, I had a very pleasant exchange with Yoram Hazony off stage, of course. And then we went to the Shuk. And experienced Jerusalem again, a real Jerusalem experience. Walked over there in suits. Me and my Israeli friend, who's like the platonic ideal of an Israeli IDF guy. And, so he looks like my bodyguard. I look like an American politician. And we're famous in the Shuk. And we had great time trying different things, kanafa, shawarma, some fresh squeezed pomegranate juice, like the whole Shuk experience, trying the, what is it, havla. It's this ground up sesame dessert stuff. It's really good. Tried like 3 flavors. Good time. Then off to a fancy dinner. Get up the next day. Now we're in the Herut teaching mode all day long. Fantastic day. Public event at night. Very, very nice. I had an interview in between. I really encourage you guys to watch this one where I went with Doron Spielman for JNS, which was a Jewish news syndicate, and you can look that up. And I really encourage you to watch this interview. It's one of the better ones I ever gave. It got all the best ideas in my head before I did my public event with Herut there. Then the next day, Thursday, I went up to a yeshiva, specifically Elisha Yeshiva, which is in Samaria, and sat with a rabbi for the entire morning. And we studied. We had this plan to go to the Shiloh site later in the afternoon. And then I had an important dinner with, some I guess, important people, including some members of Knesset that evening. But in between, we were going to go to the Shiloh Tabernacle site, which is this archaeological site. It's just crazy what's there. But first, the yeshiva at Eli. I've never been to a yeshiva before. I don't know what a yeshiva is, but this is like, here's Jewish values on crack. I got to look at the Talmud. Oh no, the Talmud. So, it's like a school, but it's not like a school any American who's not Jewish would recognize. It's so loud, at least in this, these rooms, I don't know what they're called, but they're like a library space or a study space, but everybody's talking. They study in pairs and they're debating everything. So this is why I brought up the Talmud. It's very interesting. They pull off, a volume of the Talmud off of the shelf. It's all in Hebrew. I can't read it. It's probably says all the horrible things everybody says it says. No, I'm just kidding. What it says, it looks like kind of, sorry for everybody, just take me in good humor. It looks a little bit like a Tetris inside. So you got this kind of like portion of Torah, and then it's surrounded by commentaries and in smaller and smaller font. The ones on the outside are so small, I don't know how these people read. I'm surprised all the Jews didn't go blind reading this. It's so small font, but it's like commentary with commentary on commentary and commentary on the commentary on the commentary, all the way out to then more commentary at the bottom. And what it is it's a book with a debate encoded in it. And because of the format of the way it's written, it's like the debate is on every page. And there are many volumes, and the books are very long, and so it's debate after debate after debate. So of course all these propagandists say it says this in the Talmud, all these terrible things, but what it is that it's a debate. Here's this thing from the Bible, and now they're deciding, what do we do with this? How do we apply it to law? So they're trying to figure out how to apply it, and you have debates, and some things are, well, would it mean, should we do this? Or somebody arguing we should do this, and then the other guy's like, no, it shouldn't be that. But then they take the bad thing out of context and say that the Talmud says to do
this. Well, technically it does say that, but in the context of a debate where the bad thing is being shot down by other commentaries, it's like this very different thing. The parallel I would give for like a Christian audience who understands, or even a Western audience who understands the history, the story in the Bible with King Solomon, the famous one with the baby. He's going to find out who the baby's real mother is, so he says we're going to cut the baby in half, and then of course the real mother's like, no, give it to her or whatever, and therefore reveals herself, and Solomon is able to give the baby to the real mother. And so it'd be like reading that story, and then these Talmud propagandists, what they would do is read that story and say, Jews say cut babies in half and call it wisdom. Like, that's how out of context we're talking about here. It's just completely ridiculous. But then I sit down with a rabbi there. It was a wonderful experience. In the room, all the noise. They said the noise will help you focus, maybe because it was in a language I don't speak, but it was true. And we talked. He was supposed to teach me about something very specific and philosophical, and what that means is that we're going to go through a text, and we're going to talk about it, we're going to debate it, we're going to look at it, we're going to go back and forth, and we're going to try to understand it together. That same culture of debate that you see written and coded in the Talmud is there with the people. And this is like a school, right? This is what people do for like 2 or 4 years to get this kind of religious legal education. It's a very different way of thinking. But all we ended up having time to do in the roughly 3 hours that we spent was to go over the 5,800 whatever years of Jewish history instead, and kind of get an overview. The rabbi was very kind in giving me that in a very detailed way, connected to some very important lessons. He had these ideas, again, Jewish values. These ideas like, okay, so there's that guy over there and you don't agree with him and you really don't like him, but God has a purpose for him. And if God, this kind of like eminence of perfection and love, can tolerate his being here and he's got a purpose for him, then why can't we? So there you have this idea in the Jewish values of like, look, we're not always going to agree. We're not always going to see things the same way. We're going to debate things. We're going to kind of talk it over. And, we don't have to tolerate inappropriate behavior. We don't have to tolerate terrorists, obviously. Many of the people in that yeshiva it's actually like a school for military to connect to religious and legal studies. And so obviously you don't have to tolerate bad behavior, but you do have this recognition of the, image of God being in all people. And this idea, like, you talk about, love your neighbor, like with Jesus teaching that in the New Testament, like in the Gospels, like he really connected to that idea, like this idea of what the Imago Dei really means, what it really means if everybody's made in the image of God and there's a purpose for everybody on the earth, and that purpose is what it is. And it's us, we might not know it and we need to search for it. This is, again, a point where I have a deep connection to American values, because what I think the American tradition of freedom, which has this deep, deep, deep root standing on Jerusalem, is this idea that, well, since we're not God ourselves, since we aren't God, we don't necessarily know. Maybe that other guy has a purpose. Maybe he has to be able to fulfill it. Maybe he needs the freedom to be able to fulfill that purpose. And as long as he's not a terrorist, so to speak, as long as he's not damaging to each of our individual rights, which are rooted in our individual dignity and our individual standing one to another, as long as he's not abrogating that, as long as he's not taking over that, then we have no real ground to stand upon to tell him that he is or is not living his life the right ways. So it's not individualism, because that's not what's going on, but there is in the Jewish value structure, but it's this idea, first of all, that you're accepting a responsibility unto the world, but therefore you also have to have the freedom to be able to pursue this and debate it and to respect one another in a way, and get to really connect with this view of life, this vision. Really incredible. And again, just to bring up the point, one of the things we did when we took the tour of the yeshiva was to go into the room that is kind of dedicated, partly dual purpose, but partly as a memorial to members of that yeshiva who have fallen in war. And their pictures are on the wall, and there's 57 of them. 57 pictures on the wall, and you're staring there, and these are people who studied with each other and friends of each other and were brought up in a learning environment, and there's 57 of them that were killed in war. And everywhere you have this memorial of the threat of death and the imperative of life and of living and security and reality. And it all just feels like and yet this emphasis on freedom, this emphasis on the capacity to be free to accept your responsibility as a concept, right? This free to accept your responsibility and thus become a light unto the world, I think is something that I really took away. I don't know if that's what the rabbi hoped to give me, but something I really took away. I had it was a very great rabbinical experience there. If you haven't sat down and talked to rabbis, I really recommend it. Most of them have fantastic senses of humor. They have great perspective. They're very, very thoughtful and interesting. They're very grounded people in my experience. The ones that I've met, which is probably a few dozen at this point. I had another experience with a rabbi while I was over there that I'd love to share with you. I was at the fancy meal I mentioned briefly the other night after the conference. I was at that fancy meal, and I was sitting next to the rabbi from Bondi Beach, Sydney, Australia, where obviously that horrific terror attack just took place at Hanukkah last year. And so people were talking about, you have this good view of Jerusalem from that place, and we're looking at the view of Jerusalem, and we're talking, and there's kind of this recurrent joke about how the Jews are not good at genocide. And I leaned over to the rabbi and I said, Rabbi, the Jews, as far as I can tell, are pretty good at almost everything. Why is it that Jews are not good at genocide? And he doesn't know me. I don't know him. This was a cheeky question. He didn't know if I was like playing. He didn't know that I'm a fun and thoughtful guy who's got a little like troll humor streak going on in me. He caught up later. We had some great laughter together after this. So he leans over to me, and I think this is the peak rabbi moment of the whole thing. He leans over to me and very, very gently says to me, and this is very close to the exact quote. I wish I had it exactly. I wish I would have written it down in that instant. But he said, if the Jews wanted to be good at genocide, we would be good at genocide. But this is a matter of choice. Jews do not want to be good at genocide. And I was like, man, this guy is legit. How could you have a better answer than that to that question? And then, of course, he figured out that I'm, not giving him a hard time. I'm not putting him on the spot. And then we had a good laugh because they're all very interesting, very insightful, kind of hilarious people. So at any rate, it was very enriching. But to sit down at this yeshiva with another rabbi, David is his name, and very good day, learning in that yeshiva Jewish style, learning to think in a different way, right? So this is a reason for a lot of Jewish success, is learning to think in a way where you consider all sides, just like in the Talmud. You consider, here's the piece of Torah, and now you consider different sides of the argument, and you make the argument, and you steelman the argument, and then you try to work through where the argument has flaws, or where it's weak, or where it's strong, or where it's good, or where... This is a different way of thinking. A lot of people want to hear this is the thing and this is the answer, but this is a different way of approaching thinking. And then to have this tied, like it's tied to the very root of civilization, to God and what God wants in the world for people who have chosen to accept the responsibility of living according to his guidelines. This is a fantastically strange thing. And then, of course, you're here in this also modern setting where you've got the old and the new kind of happening at the same time in the whole thing. I won't go into it. I think you picking up what I'm laying down. It's almost a semi-emotional experience to connect to it. So I'm very grateful for the opportunity to have spent time in that yeshiva, learning in that style, even though we didn't really get to the lesson we were supposed to get to. That's perfectly fine. It's a very fascinating thing to have got to do, very edifying. Then off we go to ancient Shiloh to see where the tabernacle, if that's really the site, and I'm pretty sure that they're right about it being really the site, that's where the Ark of the Covenant was. That's intense. This is what I'm talking about connecting to freaking history and living freaking history, right? And then here, of course, this is where I put the pictures on. They have the red heifers there. And I'm not going to get into the red heifer story, but the idea is that there's in the book of Numbers in the Bible, there's this very old purification ritual involving a perfectly red heifer. And so even connecting, and the only reason there are red heifers is because of a breeding project that came up in Texas from some Christians, because they disappeared, 2,000 years ago or thereabouts. It's just crazy, the new and the old kind of in one thing. And then, of course, that one ties possibly to the future. I don't know if I buy it. Not worried about that. I put the joke on X that I was uncovering some big stuff here with the red cows. But what's really strange there is there's ancient Shiloh, there's just all this broken pottery all over. Some of it's from the Byzantine era, so like 400, 500, and old. And it's just in piles, huge piles on the ground. All this ancient pottery. There's so much pottery, they don't know what to do with it, and some piles on the ground. People take pieces home. It's freaking incredible. Ancient Byzantine stuff. But Shiloh, you connect to some of the oldest rituals of the Jewish people, and these values haven't changed. The emphasis on purity, the emphasis on celebration of life, and it just hasn't changed. But there it is in a modern context, but it hasn't changed. But it's in a modern context, but it hasn't changed. And prophecy and the future aside. So this is amazing. And of course, I'm with good people. We go off and we have pizza, just normal everyday life stuff. Next thing you know, we're going the next morning. We go down to Herodion. Herodion was this palace Herod built. Herod's a Roman, obviously. Every Christian knows who he is. He was a madman in a sense. He builds this palace on a volcano. Then he decides he wants it to be his tomb. So right after he finishes this glorious palace, has Agrippa come and visit. He has it demolished and turned into a mausoleum. So there's ruins, but the ruins aren't necessarily the ruins of time, some of time, but it was also because Herod destroyed his own palace. So here we are standing in places where Agrippa drank wine. Looking out, however, at the Area A, the area is controlled by the Palestinian Authority, and some views radicalize you because not all values are Jewish values or Western values, and it's like, I'll leave it at that. Some views radicalize you. Some views. You see the red sign that's like Israeli citizens are forbidden to go in here. If you go in here, you take your life in your own hands. Like, this is insane. This is insane. As they talk about an apartheid state. But I'll leave it at that. I don't have to elaborate on that. Then Masada, went to Masada, I had a Shabbat dinner also. I don't want to talk about the Shabbat dinner, but I'll come back to that maybe last. I had Shabbat dinner that night with Michael Eisenberg and his family. It was fantastic. Went off to, the next morning, went down to Masada, floated in the Dead Sea. The stories there. I've wanted to see Masada since I was 11 years old, and I watched the movie at school in my Latin class. It's like lifetime dreams come true when you visit Israel. Saw the, what is it, Kerman? Is that where what it is, where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found? That's unbelievable, these caves. We didn't stop at Ein Gedi, but it was over there. Next trip. That's what you always say there. Next trip. There's too much to see. Next trip. Jewish values. We want to show you it all. Next trip. But Shabbat dinner really is a good capstone, and I've actually got to run, so I have to cut it short anyway. I have an appointment, but Shabbat dinner, it's crazy. As an outsider, it's crazy. You have this whole huge family, just so many people coming together. They all have not all of them, but most of them have big families. And then there's these prayers, but people are talking, and it's like people are singing the prayers, but people are also talking and joking with each other. And there's like little kids like everywhere, and it's chaos and order and holy and lived in and noisy and not and special, but familiar. And it's all just bound together with love. It's just like the most amazing thing. And they reconnect every week to each other and to their traditions this way. It's just the most amazing thing. Just the most amazing thing. And so then, that's a intelligent conversation, laughing, funny conversation, games, and then all of a sudden singing and prayers again. And just such an amazing experience, and the family and the connection. And outside, the whole city of Jerusalem just goes dead silent, just dead silent. Shabbat arrives, the traffic is gone. There are no cars, or virtually no cars, on the street. There's people outside talking and carrying on like it would have been before there were cars. This connection, again, memory and growth and life and love. I'm telling you. So why did the security guy come back to Kibbutz Nir Oz? Well, I can't speak for him, but he said Jewish values, and I got the real Jerusalem experience on this trip. I got a taste of it, and telling you, if you get the chance, go. You've got to go.